During the early period of the Spanish colonial rule,
known as Esteban, he was the first non-Indian to cross the present states of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona.
In the late 19th century, Yanga was named a national hero of Mexico.
That changed the map of the world, and yet he's largely unknown.
He is known for successfully resisting a Spanish attack on the colony.
The brave African. Gaspar Yanga was a brave African man who led a group of enslaved Africans in a small maroon colony in the highlands near Veracruz, Mexico, during the Spanish colonial rule. He was said to be a member of the royal family of Gabon and was captured and sold into slavery in Mexico, where he was known as Gaspar Yanga. Yanga led his band of slaves to escape the highlands near Veracruz around 1570 and built a small maroon colony, or palenque. The colony's isolation helped protect it for over 30 years, and other fugitive slaves found their way there. Because Yanga's people survived in part by raiding caravans taking goods along the Camino Real between Veracruz and Mexico City, in 1609, the Spanish colonial government decided to undertake a campaign to regain control of this territory. Yanga's Maroons not only plundered the haciendas and farms within their reach to survive, but also attacked the Viceroyalty-era Mexico-Veracruz Road, which connected the Gulf's main port with the capital of New Spain. These attacks destabilized the viceregal economy and made waging a war against the Maroons an unprofitable and hopeless enterprise. Despite the Spanish government's attempts to subdue Yanga's bellicose group, Yanga's Maroons were able to defend themselves on multiple occasions. They had hiding places that were difficult to access and allowed the Maroons to quickly defend themselves. This rebellion did not meet the same fate as others did, as losses were high and attacks on the Royal Road destabilized the viceregal economy. Finally, the Spanish agreed to parley, and Yanga's terms were agreed to, with the additional provisos that only Franciscan priests would tend to the people, and that Yanga's family would be granted the right of rule. In 1618, the treaty was signed, and by 1630, the town of San Lorenzo de los Negros de Cerralvo was established. Located in today's Veracruz province, the town in the 21st century is known as Yanga, named in honor of Gaspar Yanga. Yanga's successful resistance to Spanish colonial rule made him a national hero of Mexico and the first liberator of America. Yanga's legacy remains significant in Black history. He led a group of enslaved Africans to escape the highlands and establish a colony of self-rule. His success in resisting Spanish attacks and achieving an agreement with the colonial government for self-rule paved the way for future movements towards freedom and equality. A remarkable woman. Isabel de Olvera was a remarkable woman of mixed racial heritage who lived during the colonial period in Mexico. Her story challenges the male-dominated narrative of Spanish conquistadors and governors, whose names are still celebrated in modern-day New Mexico. Isabel's story also sheds light on the lives of free people of color and their struggles for autonomy and rights in a new colony. In 1600, Isabel joined Juan Guerrero de Resa's expedition to New Mexico as a servant to a Spanish woman. As a mulatta with an African father and native Mexican mother, Isabel was one of many black and mulatto men and women who came to New Mexico during the colonial period. However, their stories were often ignored or neglected by historians of the time. Isabel's voice and story were inserted into the historical records when she made a deposition before the governor of her home in Querétaro, Mexico. She asked for protection on her journey to New Mexico, declaring that she was a free woman, unmarried, and the legitimate daughter of Hernando and an Indian named Magdalena. She was afraid that as a single woman of color, she might lose her rights and freedoms in a new place. Isabel's petition was successful, and she was granted the right to travel to New Mexico. Her deposition was significant because it challenged the patriarchal and racial hierarchies of the time. Not only was Isabel free from slavery, but she also asserted her single status and demanded justice. Her deposition shows that free people of color in colonial Mexico were aware of their rights and fought for them. Isabel's story is a testament to the agency and resilience of free women of color in colonial Mexico. Her petition also highlights the complexities of racial identity in a colonial society where one's status and rights were determined by one's ancestry and skin color. Overall, Isabel de Olvera's story provides valuable insights into the lives of free people of color in colonial Mexico and their struggles for autonomy and rights. Her voice and story challenge the male-dominated narrative of Spanish conquest and colonization, and show that women of color also played significant roles in the history of the Americas. Symbol of bravery and adventure. It's often said that the history books are written by the victors. In the case of colonial North America, this is all too true. The stories of white male explorers like Coronado, Peralta, and de Vargas dominate the annals of history. Yet, there were others who played a critical role in exploring the continent, and their stories have often gone untold. One of these figures was Estevanico, also known as Estebanico, Esteban de Dorantes, and Mustafa Azamori. Born around 1500, little is known about Estevanico's early life, except that he was sold into slavery in the Moroccan town of Azemmour when he was just a young man. He was eventually sold to Andres Dorantes de Carranza, a Spanish nobleman who was part of the Narvaeza expedition to explore La Florida, or what is now northern Mexico and southern United States. The expedition was led by Panfilo de Narvaez, who intended to establish 2 settlements near present-day Tampico, Mexico. However, the fleet was hit by storms and forced to the western coast of Florida, where they landed in present-day St. Petersburg. Narvaez ordered his ships, along with 100 men and 10 women, to sail north in search of a large harbour, while he led another 300 men with 42 horses north along the coast. But there was no large harbour to be found, and Narvaez never saw his ships again. After marching 300 miles north and having armed confrontations with Native Americans, the survivors built boats to sail westward along the Gulf Coast shoreline, hoping to reach Panuco and the Rio de la Palmas. However, a storm struck when they were near Galveston Island, Texas. Approximately 80 men survived the storm, being washed ashore at Galveston Island. After 1529, 3 survivors from one boat, including Estevanico, became enslaved by Croatoan Indians. In 1532, they were reunited with a survivor from a different boat, Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca. The 4 spent years enslaved on the Texas Barrier Islands. In 1534, the 4 survivors escaped into the American interior and became medicine men. They walked nearly 2,000 miles since their initial landing in Florida and finally reached a Spanish settlement in Sinaloa. From there, they traveled to Mexico City, 1,000 miles to the south. As medicine men, they were treated with great respect and offered food, shelter, and gifts, and villages held celebrations in their honor. When they decided they wanted to leave, the host village would guide them to the next village, with as many as 3,000 people following them to the next destination. The party traversed the continent as far as western Mexico, into the Sonoran Desert, to the region of Sonora in New Spain, present-day Mexico. Cabeza de Vaca published the Relación, a book about their 8-year survival journey, in 1542, and included information about Estevanico. It was reprinted again in 1555. In the Relación, Cabeza de Vaca said Estevanico often went in advance of the other 3 survivors, because Estevanico had learned some parts of the indigenous language. As Estevanico approached the village of Cibola, he sent a messenger ahead to announce his arrival. But instead of welcoming him, the chief of the first village angrily threatened to take away the life of anyone who came back. Undeterred, Estevanico pushed forward with his party, and upon arrival, the villagers took their trade goods and held them overnight without any food or water. One of the Indians from Estevanico's party managed to escape and hide nearby, and the next morning, he saw the men of Cibola chasing Estevanico and shooting arrows at him. He wasn't sure what happened to the African, but he knew others in his party were slayed. The Indian quickly rushed to tell Fray Marcos, who was leading the expedition. When Fray Marcos heard the news, he hurried forward, only to meet 2 wounded and blood-stained Sonorans from the advance party, who assumed Estevanico was lifeless. Deniza quickly returned to New Spain and wrote an account of the expedition for the viceroy. He reported on the passing away of Estevanico, as related to him by members of the Africans Party. A year later, a much larger Spanish expedition, led by Francisco Vázquez de Coronado, reached the pueblo where Estevanico was reportedly slayed. They found many of the things Estevanico wore, confirming his demise. The inhabitants of the Zuni Pueblo where he died claimed that Estevanico was a bad man who slayed and attacked their women, and they slayed him in retaliation. However, other accounts suggest different theories about his demise. Some speculate that the Zuni may have enslaved Estevanico because they saw him as impersonating a medicine man, while others believe that he may have resembled an evil sorcerer in the Zuni religion. Juan Francisco Maura even suggested that Estevanico and his friends remained among the Ashiwi, who probably helped him fake his demise so he could regain his freedom.
During the early period of the Spanish colonial rule, born in May 14, 1545, Gaspar Yanga, Y-A-N-G-A, was an African known for being the leader of a maroon colony of slaves. There isn't an accurate record of his death. In the highlands near Veracruz, Mexico, then New Spain, in 1609. He is known for successfully resisting a Spanish attack on the colony.
Regardless of how he passed away, Estevanico's legacy as the first African to explore North America remains a significant part of history.
Known as Esteban, he was the first non-Indian to cross the present states of Texas. He walked over 5,000 miles, exploring southern part of our country.
His story has become a legend in Spain and New Spain, and his exploration and cataloguing of the Gulf of Mexico and what is now modern-day Florida and Texas have inspired numerous stories and myths.
For self-rule of a maroon settlement, it was later called San Lorenzo de los Negros.
He was a slave like no other, strong, talented, and faithful. The life of Esteban is one of the most fascinating stories in American history.
Finally, in 1618, Yanga achieved an agreement with the colonial government.
Determined to finish his job, he offered to lead the expedition to find the 7 cities of gold.
In the late 19th century, Yanga was named a national hero of Mexico.
Even today, his name lives on as a symbol of bravery and adventure. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.